Now, why do we consider this topic very important? Macroeconomic realities are affecting you in your everyday life, and you'll find out shortly. So, why are the prices of things rising and so high? Right? Why is it hard to get a job in Nigeria? Why is the naira losing value? Did the Russian-Ukraine war affect the prices of golden morn in the supermarket? Or why did the Russian-Ukraine war affect the prices? These random questions are all related to macroeconomics. All right. So now you understand why this would be important. Now let's begin. And like I told you at the beginning of my presentation, my style is deliberately unique to help you understand the subject very well. And I'm going to lay down the foundation and take you through a journey of understanding. So please follow me. Now, observing and explaining the behavior and interactions between households, businesses, and governments. That is what I define as economics. So when you say, what is economics? Economics is how you explain the behavior and interactions between households, business, and governments. Now, why do poor people have more children than rich people? That's what economics will seek to answer. Are you following me? I'm sure you're following me. So that's an example of, so we say, what is economics? Because I want to define it. Now, when we define economics, all kinds of definitions are confused. Listen, economics is how you observe and explain the behavior and interactions between households, businesses, and governments. Now, there is a popular definition that says how we manage scarce resources. Yes, scarce resources is one of them, but there's also a scenario where you have excess resources. So all of that, and that's why I asked, why do poor people have more children than rich people? That's an economic question. Of course, it also can be a sociology question. Let's now define micro versus macro. All right, I'm laying down some concepts. Please follow me. I'm establishing my basis so that when you come into these things, you'd understand. So I've defined economics. It's about three entities: households or individuals, businesses, and government. That's clear. Two, micro versus macro. So micro is focused on these entities I mentioned: households and businesses, right? That's what micro deals with. E.g., why factories like to use contract staff? Why do factories like to use contract staff? That's a micro question, and typically it can be deduced as such. The next one is macro, which is why we're here in the first place. But to help you understand and remember what macro is how everyone in the country is affected by everything else. I repeat, how everyone in the country is affected. So for example, why the hijack rate? That's a macro conversation. It's not a micro conversation, all right? So I believe you are following me. What am I doing? Let me just take you back again so you remember, because I want you to really understand this. We're setting context. And the first thing we said when we began was, what is economics? Then micro versus macro. So that if you hear micro, you know what it is. And micro deals with households and businesses, their individual decisions and how they operate. So your own household budget is a micro conversation. Your company that makes bottled water, all their interactions in business, it's their own money. As long as it's within that business, their productivity, how they increase cost, how they reduce cost, how they maximize profit, that is a micro conversation. And there are microeconomists that deal with that, usually consultants. But macroeconomic, on the other part, is how it affects everybody. And like I gave an example, why is there hijack barrier? It's a macro conversation and not a micro. Now let's look at the last two. Monetary versus fiscal. You also see this a lot. Okay, so what's the difference? Monetary policy is how the central bank, which is an arm of the government or a government institution as it were, how it manages money to achieve set objectives, full stop. I repeat, monetary policy is, and in US it's Federal Reserve, here it is central bank. How they manage money, because money is the store of value. The world would have been chaotic if there was no money. Imagine what would be the basis for which I would buy a laptop from somebody that when I make wood, so also when I make furniture. So I make furniture, I want to buy a laptop. What will I do? I will now go and do barter. What if he doesn't want wood? Then I have to go and look for someone who wants wood, change it to what he wants, and then give. No. So it's madness, right? So that's why money was created. Money is a store of value. That's where we reserve value. So if you have $2,000, that's a store value that I can use to purchase anything that is worth $2,000. But the entity that is responsible for managing that is the central bank, and they manage the supply right? How much we have of it and how less we have of it, which you find out why it's important through what they call monetary policy. Now, I don't want you to start getting confused because that's the problem with, and my job here is to open your mind. So I repeat, monetary policy is how money, the supply of money is managed for certain objectives. And you will see the reason why when it comes to issues around inflation. If you remember what happened to Nigeria in the early part of the year when money was scarce, and you saw what we all went through, that's a classic example of the power of monetary policy, even though that one is at the very base level. Now, the fiscal, on the other part, is about government and how government generates and spends its money. So in other words, and I will now explain that in a moment. When government wants to intervene in the economy, they decide, okay, let's train youth. So they decide, okay, let's just get companies that if any company would hire youth, we'll give them a discount. Or if a company wants to do any social responsibility, we'll give them a discount on their taxes. That's government intervening indirectly through what they call fiscal policy. All right, so one has to do with money solely, price stability. The second one, which is fiscal, has to do with government spending. Then lastly, geopolitics. Now, this is important because nations interact and try to protect their individual interests, which would impact global economies. So why is the West supporting Ukraine? That's a very important question. It's a geopolitical question, right? And that affects us, and I'll tell you how when we get to that point. Then lastly, of course, we need to pay attention to the news. That's when we understand geopolitics. So once again, I took us through definition of economics. I took us through monetary and fiscal policy. I took us through geopolitics. And I also took us through micro versus macroeconomics. All right? These are not exhaustive, by the way, but some of the most important things that I would like you to know I've highlighted. So take note in case you find others in future.